The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the bustling downtown cafe, scattering golden streaks across the polished wooden floor. Amelia stood just inside the entrance, clutching her worn tote bag tightly. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the nerves that always came when she found herself in spaces she felt she didn't belong. She had been running errands all morning, rushing between her second job and the school, trying to squeeze in a small moment for herself, a hot cup of coffee and maybe a quiet place to breathe. Her eyes darted around the cafe. The tables were a mix of businessmen tapping at laptops, friends laughing over brunch, and couples quietly sharing breakfast. Her gaze fell on a table near the center, occupied by a man who exuded a presence she couldn't ignore. He was impeccably dressed, suit crisp, watch gleaming under the light, and yet he carried himself with a calm, almost unapproachable confidence. Amelia hesitated, shifting the weight of her bag from one shoulder to the other. Taking a deep breath, she approached the table, trying to steady her voice. "Excuse me," she said softly, her words slightly trembling. "Can I share this table?" The man looked up slowly, piercing blue eyes meeting hers. There was a pause that stretched just a little too long, a measured silence that made Amelia's stomach twist. Then, in a tone that was smooth, controlled, and tinged with a playful sharpness, he said, "Only if you pay the bill." Amelia blinked, momentarily stunned. She had expected a curt refusal or a dismissive glance, not this challenge. Her lips parted, and she swallowed hard. I can do that," she murmured, glancing at the menu on the table. She wasn't sure how she would afford it, but she forced herself to nod, determined not to retreat. The man's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile, as if he recognized something in her hesitation, strength mixed with vulnerability. "Good," he said. "Then it's settled." He gestured to the chair across from him. "I'm Nathan, by the way." Amelia hesitated for a heartbeat before sliding the chair out and taking a seat. "Amelia," she replied, trying to sound composed, though her mind was racing. She noticed every detail, the gleam of his shoes, the subtle scent of expensive cologne, the way he held himself with complete control. It was intimidating, yet oddly comforting, as if being in his presence meant that, for a moment, the chaos of her life could pause. Amelia settled into the chair, tugging her tote bag onto her lap. She could feel her heart racing, a mix of nerves and curiosity. Nathan's gaze lingered on her for a moment, not intrusive, but assessing, as if he were trying to read a story in her expression. The hum of the cafe seemed to fade, leaving only the subtle scent of freshly brewed coffee and the faint clatter of plates. "So," Nathan began, his voice calm and measured, "what brings you here today?" Amelia blinked, caught off guard. She wasn't used to strangers taking a genuine interest in her life. Usually, people asked questions out of politeness, or worse, pity. She hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I needed a break," she said quietly. "Between work and the kids, I hardly get a moment to just breathe." Nathan nodded, tilting his head slightly. "I understand that," he said. "It's easy to forget to take care of yourself when life is busy. Even the smallest moments matter." Amelia felt a flicker of warmth at his words. There was something grounding about him, a steadiness that made it easier to speak. She found herself talking about her morning errands, the long hours at work, and the little victories that kept her going. Nathan listened intently, asking thoughtful questions without judgment. "I admire that," he said. Finally, after she described her kids' school projects. "It takes strength to manage all of that on your own. Most people would collapse under the pressure." Amelia glanced up, surprised. Compliments like that were rare. Most people saw her fatigue, not her resilience. "Thank you," she said softly, a shy smile forming. "Some days it feels like I'm barely keeping it together, but we manage." Nathan leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. "That's all anyone can do, really. Manage and keep moving forward." He paused, then added with a trace of curiosity, "Do you ever get moments for yourself, Amelia? Moments that are just yours?" She thought about it, realizing how seldom that happened. "Rarely," she admitted, "but when I do, I try to savor it, even if it's just a cup of coffee in a quiet cafe." Nathan's smile widened slightly, as if he appreciated her honesty. "Then I'm glad you're savoring it here. With me, he said lightly, gesturing to the table. There was no arrogance in his tone, just a subtle acknowledgement that this brief encounter, though ordinary, could be meaningful. For a few moments, they ate in companionable silence, each lost in thought, yet connected by the shared table, the shared meal, and the small, quiet understanding that sometimes, connection could be found in the unlikeliest of places. By now, the clatter and chatter of the cafe had faded into the background, replaced by a quieter rhythm between Amelia and Nathan. Their conversation flowed more naturally, moving from the surface of daily routines to the deeper textures of life. Nathan leaned slightly forward, resting one elbow on the table, the sunlight catching the sharp lines of his face. "So," he began, "what do you do for work, Amelia?" "I juggle a couple of jobs," she admitted, glancing down at her hands. "One's at the daycare near my kid's school, the other is at a small retail store downtown. It's exhausting, but it keeps us afloat." She paused, uncertain whether to continue. "It's not glamorous, but it's honest work." Nathan's eyes softened. "I admire that," he said quietly. "Most people chase prestige or comfort. You're building something solid, even if it doesn't get recognition." Amelia felt a flush of warmth. Recognition was rare these days. "Thank you," she murmured, though she quickly changed the subject. "And you look busy, important, even." Nathan chuckled, a low, effortless sound. "I suppose I am," he said lightly, though his eyes hinted at the weight behind the casual words. "I run a company. It's demanding, and sometimes it feels like there's no pause. But there's a freedom in it, too, the ability to shape things, to make an impact." Amelia listened, fascinated and slightly intimidated. He spoke casually, yet the authority in his tone and the subtle luxury around him, the polished briefcase, the sleek pen he twirled, spoke of a life she had only glimpsed in magazines or behind office windows during her lunch breaks. It was a world entirely unlike hers, yet Nathan spoke with a groundedness that made it feel almost attainable. "I can't even imagine," she said honestly. "I barely have time to manage my schedule, let alone a whole company." Nathan's expression softened. "It's not easy, believe me. Every life has its challenges. Yours might not come with board meetings or billion-dollar decisions, but it comes with its own battles, responsibility, sacrifice, love, exhaustion. Don't underestimate the strength that takes." Amelia looked at him, feeling a strange kinship, despite the chasm of circumstance between them. For a fleeting moment, it wasn't the gap in wealth or lifestyle that mattered, it was the human story, the shared struggle, the quiet resilience that defined them both. As they continued to talk, the conversation shifted subtly toward dreams, small ambitions, impossible fantasies, the things each of them wished for but rarely voiced. Nathan revealed glimpses of a life filled with pressure, expectation, and constant decision-making, while Amelia spoke of small joys, a sunny afternoon with her children, a quiet moment alone, the hope of stability. The contrast was stark, yet in that contrast, a fragile connection began to form, the kind that happens when two strangers glimpse the heart of each other. The conversation had settled into a quieter rhythm, punctuated by the occasional clink of silverware and the muted chatter of other patrons. Amelia shifted in her chair, feeling an unfamiliar ease in Nathan's presence. Somehow, the initial tension of sitting across from a stranger, one who seemed to inhabit an entirely different world, had softened into something tentative but comforting. "I don't usually talk about this with strangers," Amelia began, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced down at her hands, twisting the edge of her tote bag nervously. "But life's been hard lately. Bills, work, school, trying to keep everything together. Some days I feel like I'm just surviving, not living." Nathan's expression didn't waver. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting lightly on the table, his gaze steady but kind. "Amelia," he said gently, "thank you for trusting me enough to say that. It's not easy to admit you're struggling, especially when you're expected to be strong all the time." She gave a small, rueful smile. "Yeah, strong. That's what people expect from single moms, right? But no one sees the exhaustion. No one sees the nights you lie awake worrying about everything, from groceries to school fees to whether your kids feel loved enough." Nathan nodded, the corners of his mouth softening into a faint smile. "I see it," he said simply. "And I respect it. There's courage in what you do every day. It's not the kind of courage that headlines celebrate, but it's real. And it matters. Amelia blinked, touched despite herself. Nobody had ever framed her life like that. Her sacrifices, her quiet determination, her endless juggling of responsibilities. She had always thought of her struggles as burdens, but hearing them recognized as strength felt like a small, luminous revelation. For a moment, they sat in silence, each lost in thought. Nathan's eyes lingered on her with a sincerity that made her pulse quicken, not with attraction, necessarily, but with the rare warmth of being truly seen. "I don't usually get moments like this," she admitted softly, "where someone listens without judgment. It's kind of nice." Nathan smiled, a gentle, almost teasing curve of his lips. "Then I'm glad we shared this table," he said. "Sometimes life hands you unexpected moments. Small ones, quiet ones, but ones that can shift everything." Amelia laughed softly, the sound tinged with relief. "Shift everything. That's a lot to expect from a cup of coffee and a borrowed table." Nathan's eyes twinkled. Sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the biggest meaning. And in that moment, over a shared table and simple conversation, Amelia realized that life had, unexpectedly, offered her a glimpse of connection, understanding, and perhaps even hope. Something she hadn't allowed herself to imagine in a long, long time.